Well, I want to go to the end of the introduction with the hope and expectation that between now and Wednesday, not only does everybody have Dolores Williams' book, but that we will have read chapters 1 and 2, which be the biggest hunk of reading we'll ever do between one class session and another, if you count it that way. But that's for Wednesday. At the end of the introduction, page 11, Williams ends this way. She's been talking about, her work here and interesting stuff. So maybe I'll start at the bottom of 10. Hence the method, and there's a whole pursuit called theological method. And methodology or theological method is still important, but it was really big. I would say like I want to go like late 70s of last century, certainly for a couple of decades, where many theologians put a lot of effort and energy into simply thinking about, well, what is theology and how do we go about doing it? And how many different ways are there to do it? And then try to describe how they would do it if they were to do it. And sometimes this has been called, that theologians got paralyzed by questions of methodology. How do we use scripture? What's the role of tradition or experience? Things like this. And how does it all work together? And so in a lot of books, a lot of theologies began with some extensive methodology. Some ways, that's what this introduction is in Williams' book. So at the bottom of 10, she says, hence the method in womanist theological books often attempts first to provide pieces of fact and pieces of vision subjected to the critical reflection of the particular theologian. Okay? The second step is the constructive one. So the first is to provide various facts and vision, and she's compared it to a puzzle, putting together a puzzle. The second step is the constructive one. Sisters in the Wilderness is representative of the first step, gathering pieces of fact and pieces of vision. And you probably need to go to the previous paragraph where she discusses that a little bit more, but you can do that. Then she says, another book will have to contain my second, constructive step. I'm not sure if she ever did that second book. We may have to check on that. But then this last paragraph, many womanists perhaps agree with Mary Daly. And I checked in the back to see if there are any more references to Mary Daly in this book, and there are not. This is the one time Mary Daly shows up. Mary Daly was truly one of the real founding what's the word I want? Powers in feminist theology, starting in the early 70s probably. She wrote a book called Beyond God the Father in the early 70s. She was a Roman Catholic theologian and philosopher, taught many years at the Catholic school, Boston College, but eventually took the extreme, we'll say the radical step beyond feminist theology to where she basically just repudiated her Roman Catholic faith with which she'd been raised and which she'd been educated, and as being overly patriarchal, and there was no way to redeem it, and so on. So Mary Daly was, for everybody, just kind of thought of as, a radical feminist theologian. And so apparently in one of her books, I don't know which one, Daly thought that this big concern over method, she wasn't the only one who thought this, that a lot of theologians or observers said theologians are spinning their wheels so much on issues of method that they never actually get around to doing real theology. Certainly not an illegitimate critique. So apparently Daly at some point said that an over-concern for method in theology has got something to do with patriarchal authority, that is, with people who want to control, and with the sin of what Daly calls methodolatry. Instead of methodology, methodolatry. Without reading her Daly's critique, one might suspect that she was saying something like, people who spend their energies talking about how to do theology legitimately, and a lot of it would have to do with how you do it in an academic setting, let's say that's not a Christian college or a seminary, maybe a secular university where questions of method are even really more important. But Daly said maybe this fixation on methodology has more to do with a kind of controlling who can speak and under what conditions can they speak theologically. So one could say that methodology, or Daly perhaps was saying, it's a very constricting concern that has more to do with, again, like controlling who gets to talk or whose voice, whose writing really counts. Maybe something along those lines, okay? But she responds, but I think we womanist theologians want to be ever conscious of the way we are doing things in theology. So the way we do things, or I do things in theology, would be my method, right? So that we do not lose our intention for Black women's experience. So again, at the heart of her methodology, we'd say, is being attentive to her own experience as a Black woman and the history of Black women's experience, to provide the lens through which we view sources, including the Bible, to provide the issues that form the content of our theology, and to help us formulate the questions. And here we really come back to this course topic, the questions we ask about God's relation to Black American life and God's relation to the world in general. Okay. So that's a little bit from the opening. Now I have to tell you a quick story that involves Mary Daly and probably Dolores Williams. I probably have it in a journal somewhere. This was a National American Academy of Religion meeting. This happens annually. In fact, this year, in about a month, 5 weeks, it happens in San Diego. And I'll be giving you some possible extra credit, stuff that you might want to go to that'll be pertinent to our class. But this is an annual gathering of like professors of religion, theologians, philosophers of religion, some people believers, a good number not, or maybe believers of another tradition, a fair number of Buddhists, certainly plenty of Jews and Hindus and LDS scholars, all kinds of folks. And it's pretty international, although it's called the American Academy of Religion. It's also a really kind of a national or international meeting involving, anywhere between, I think, 6,000 and 8,000 scholars. We also now typically meet with the Society for Biblical Literature. That's all about the Bible scholars, and like Brad and Stephanie and LP are those. Yeah, they're all relatively active in the Society for Biblical Literature, and a lot of times they have the best topics. So you go to these different meetings or these little presentations in a room. Usually it's about a 1.5 or 2.5 hour long session with different papers and so on. Well, at one AAR, American Academy of Religion, I was there, big room, because this was a big panel discussion, and it was basically on feminist theologians and womanist theologians talking, I guess talking with each other. But here's what happened. The first folks to go up to this table up front, on a stage, probably four of them, at the most five, were feminist theologians, probably all Caucasian, one of whom was Mary Daly. She was the most famous one. But they all were well known. And they had a certain amount of time that they were each would present something, and then maybe there'd be time for the discussion among them. And then it was going to be the womanist theologians come up, take the same seats, same table, while the feminists went down, and the womanists would do the same thing, each give a little talk, and then maybe talk amongst themselves. And then I think probably the idea, if I recall right, was that both groups would go up front, maybe talk with each other a while, and then there'd be Q&A from the audience. Okay, so here's the big deal. The feminist theologians, and Mary Daly was the real culprit here, wouldn't shut up. To put it simply, there was a certain amount of time they had. Let's say this is a 2.5 hour session, and maybe 45 minutes, we'll say, for this group, and then 45 minutes for that group, and then maybe half hour or whatever between them, all 8 or 10, and then maybe a half hour for Q&A. So you have a schedule, and you have to honor the schedule. And to me, this is this is a matter of ethics. When you're at a conference, and there's a schedule to follow, and let's say you have 20 minutes, honor that. That's I try to do that. There are other people who have something to say. You don't get the whole time. Well, I remember this so well. Everybody's looking at their watches, and they keep getting signs from the moderator that it's time to stop. Mary Daly just, I can't remember what she was saying, but she wouldn't quit talking. And it was getting downright uncomfortable and kind of symbolic, right? Okay, so I'm not saying all the feminist theologians up there just wanted to stay there, but they're now eating into the time of this group of womanist theologians. And Mary Daly, this great champion of feminist thought, is the main culprit. Finally, and it was one of by far the most powerful and powerfully symbolic moments I've ever experienced, certainly at an AAR and just in general. The womanist theologians all stood up together. They were sitting on the front row waiting. They finally stand up and go up, the stairs to the stage, and physically, they don't have to pick up anybody and move them, but they came up and basically made it clear that it was now their time to speak. And that seemed to do it. As I recall, finally Mary Daly realized, okay. But wow, what a moment it was. And my guess is Dolores Williams was one of those people. If I can find the journal corresponding to the year that happened, which I have no idea about, at least 10 years ago, I'd probably be able to look up the names. But let's just say that Dolores Williams was one of them, because I'm sure she was. That's my story. Yeah.